Disclaimer. Any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. And today I welcome Mark J. Silverman, executive coach and author of the Rising Leader Handbook. So Mark is a man who turned adversity into an inspiring success story. At just 27 years old, Mark found himself homeless and living out of his truck, weighing only 135 pounds. But with resilience and determination, he rose above his circumstances to become a millionaire just 6 years later. Hey, Mark, welcome to the show today. Glad to have you on and make this happen.
I'm super appreciative to be here, listening to a lot of the stuff you talk about. You make such a difference in the world. Hope I can add to it.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, well, thanks for being here as well and everything you're doing. So, yeah, Mark, it'd be really great, first of all, to hear a little bit about what is a leader for you, because we hear it a lot. I hear it a lot kind of being thrown out in this day and age that we talk about leadership and leaders out there. For you, what is a leader?
The easiest way for me to define that is in talking about people I've spoken to who are great leaders and how they spoke about their journey. So every great leader that I've ever spoken to, like I'm a podcaster like you, they always speak about not their accomplishments, not what they did with their company. They always speak about their teams, what their teams did, who they helped on their teams, what impact they had on the lives of the people who were in their charge. Whenever they talk about, we hit this number, we had this percentage of growth, it's always the team did this. So for me, that always is a telltale sign of who a great leader is and was. So when you dial that back to what makes a great leader, it's someone who stood up, decided to take responsibility for the goal, the vision, the direction, and for the care of the people who were trying to accomplish it and moving it in that direction.
Okay. No, that's so kind of something wider than themselves. That's a leader for you.
Almost always. There's a big difference between charisma and a leader. There's a lot of people who have charisma, who are loud, who people do follow. I don't consider them leaders. I consider those people kind of running for their own agenda and having the charisma to have people follow along. But a real leader inspires people for something more important and a goal that we're all rowing towards.
And you've obviously written your Rising Leader Handbook. What was your main driver behind writing that and creating that?
I generally only write books when the book wants to be written. For me, the thought of writing a leadership book was ridiculous. There are so many good leadership books in the world. When it was suggested to me to write a book codifying what I do with my leaders, I said, there's enough. I've read all the other books. Basically, I don't even really know what I do with my leaders. It's kind of magic. It's kind of what we do, and I don't know. And they challenged me to codify it. So I sat down and really went through what's my special sauce? Why do I have so much success getting leaders from being either individual contributors or being in the C-suite, but not having those leadership skills? And how do I grow them up and mature them in that leadership mindset? And we found out that there's 4 themes that I tend to touch on. I'm almost always hired by a CEO who says, I have someone on the team, they're super talented, they're invaluable to the company, but they're a bull in the china closet, or they're super valuable to the company, but I can't get them to speak up in the boardrooms, or they're too in the weeds with their teams. There's always something that they haven't been able to mature because they've risen through the ranks so quickly and haven't had the guidance to grow into a leadership position. So first, we start with leading up, becoming a trusted advisor. How do you help a CEO build their vision? How do you help a CEO who feels alone, who feels like they have yes people on a team, who wants to be challenged, but has people challenging them all day, so you're not an absolute burden to them with your challenges? How do you become that trusted advisor? So that's the first thing that we work on. The second thing, and the hardest thing for most leaders, is how are you a leader on a team of other leaders? How do you lead across? I don't know about you. I'm really good at taking charge, and I'm really good at helping. But leading on a team with other people who have agendas, who have visions and goals of themselves, who have ambitions, how do you bring them together? How do you get them to be on your team so that when you're promoted, they all want to support you instead of being resentful. So how do you lead on a team of other leaders? Then how do you lead your team, which a million books written on how do you lead your team? And then the last piece is how do you lead yourself? I use all the relationships that in leading up and becoming a trusted advisor, in leading on a team with other people, on leading your team, I use all of that as fodder for how do you grow your capacity? How do you work with your nervous system and all your insecurities and all your shortcomings to become the best leader you can possibly be? And how can you thrive in all areas of your life? Because again, if I know a lot of people who have yachts and jets and all that stuff, and their families are just destroyed or their mental health is destroyed. And for me, that's not success. Unless you're successful in all areas of your life, it's kind of empty to me.
I love that. And yeah, that sort of like open approach to looking at like all areas of life and helping people get to that. You mentioned about nervous system there and leaders looking at that. Is that quite a lot of work you do on the nervous system?
I'm not a neuroscience. I've read a few books and I've done a little bit of work on my own. But when I talk about your nervous system, that's what usually wins. And I know you've had these conversations and read all these books too, judging by everything you talk about. But you can have every intention to walk into a boardroom and show up in a certain way. And then someone's going to say something to you that's going to hit that little boy or little girl inside. And all of a sudden, you're not showing up the way you intended to show up. Your nervous system is going to take over to keep you safe. It's going to run the show unless you learn it, you learn to work with it, and then you learn to ride the wave in any given situation. So your nervous system is so important for you to become emotionally intelligent, to become just mature in every situation.
I'd agree. So, Mark, I want to hear a little bit about your journey. It's quite inspiring to me, going from this place of homelessness to becoming a millionaire. Tell us a little bit about how that journey unfolded and what kind of sparked the transformation off.
Back in the 90s, you couldn't turn on TV without an infomercial of Tony Robbins selling his VHSs of his story, how he was in a one room eating soup and studied success and became this person. Over and over, he just told that story ad nauseum. And I never thought that at 63, I would know what he felt like telling the story of when I was 27 years old. But that story still gets me on stages, still gets me on podcasts, because that's what people are interested in. The fact that I was a drug addict and an alcoholic and a sex addict and pretty much an unfunctional human being through my 20s, and then was able to get sober and put things together. I think it's pretty inspiring. It's just so long ago for me. And I forget how important it is for people to hear that, because they only see this version of me. They see the author, they see the guy on stage, they see the guy who's polished and has children and all that stuff. And they don't know what I had to do internally. I talk about nervous system because inside for decades, I was this homeless guy. No matter what the outside looks like, a Hugo Boss suits, a gold watch, a sports car, it was still this homeless guy inside who showed up on my brother's doorstep just begging for money. And it was my brother who took me to AA and NA and had me go to college classes and get a job and go to the gym with him and run with his friends, and really gave me an opportunity to do what I probably should have been doing at 13, 14, and 15. At 27, 28, 29. So I got sober, went to college, wound up getting married, having kids, and slowly, the way I became successful. I was in the restaurant business and in the hotel business, making $26,000 a year when I got married. There was, even back in the 90s, that was not enough money to start a family or do anything. My now ex-wife made twice as much money as I did. And when she got pregnant, she wanted to stay home and I was still waiting on tables. And she wanted to stay home with the kid. So she had saved enough money to stay home for a year. And it was that year that I got my first sales job, because I didn't think I had any skills. I didn't think that there was anything I could do in the world. My family was restaurant business. That's all I knew was the restaurant business. And I told her when we got married, I said, I may only be a waiter for the rest of my life. I really have no prospects for anything. And she was amenable to that. But I got my first sales job, and that was terrifying. But again, everything that threads my story is I've done everything that I've ever done terrified, scared, out of my wits. Not just like scared and I'm a brave guy, scared of everything, scared that people would find out who I really was, all of that stuff. So my first sales job, I crashed and burned at the beginning because I was an introvert. I didn't like to bother people, and I was scared. And you have to make phone calls and call people and do all that stuff. It wasn't until I realized that people trust me, people like me, and if I can actually relate to someone as a human being, that was going to be my superpower. And I only learned that years later in a sales training course. After I was successful, the lead trainer said, the best sales people are introverts. And I was like, what do you mean the best salespeople are introverts? He says they ask questions, they're interested. Oh, that makes so much sense. So that year I doubled my income, and my wife didn't have to go back to work. The next year I doubled my income again. The next year, someone who I was in AA with invited me to work for their tech company that they were working at, doubled my income again. And now like all of a sudden I'm going from $26,000 a year inside being a homeless guy to outside driving a sports car. We bought $1 million house. Like now I'm at the top tech companies in the world. My resume went from looking kind of ridiculous to the best startup to startup to startup, and built a career in technology that completely changed my life.
Wow. And was there like a identity shift you had to do along the way, or did that kind of just happen? I'm just curious
Well,
because
again, the identity shift was on the outside. It wasn't on the inside. I remember I waited tables at the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington D.C. And our club trip, my first club trip, they were taking us, all the top salespeople, to Hawaii to recognize us. And I was not just in club; I was in the President's Club. I was in the top tier. So I went from waiter to like with all the lacrosse players, all the like all these college educated people, and we're in Hawaii at the Four Seasons. And now I'm a guest at the Four Seasons that I used to wait tables at. So it was really whiplash for that. It was a very different thing. And that's what later in my story, stone cold sober in my late 40s, I crashed and burned again. After all that success, the wheels started coming off everything. My marriage started falling apart. We started fighting something fierce. My health went in. All of a sudden I was having panic attacks. All this stuff started happening to me in my late 40s. Hadn't touched a drink or a drug or anything. Couldn't sell anything. I was breaking out in hives and I didn't know what was happening. Back to that nervous system thing. Those childhood traumas, all that stuff that I didn't deal with, that made me a drug addict and an alcoholic and feeling worthless to myself, came back out in midlife. And I see this over and over and over again. We wallpaper over all of that stuff instead of listening inside and doing the work that we need to do to let that shit go. And everything fell apart, when I was 47, 48 years old. And I had to start all over again. Got divorced, career was trashed. And I didn't know what was wrong with me until I started doing therapy, and I started doing trauma therapy and really uncovering all those things that I didn't know were there. And that's how I became a coach. It was doing all that inner work to build back a new Mark Silverman. Instead of wallpapering over the homeless guy, instead of wallpapering over that stuff, I let all that stuff out and I built a new person with all that stuff out on the tip of my sword. I did men's work. I did on retreats. I did trauma work, and I did all this stuff to build a new person. And now that's why I'm a coach now, is because I just have seen my contemporaries win at life and destroy everything else, right? Like a friend of mine, when we all turned about 50 years old, he bought a Bentley, a $250,000 Bentley, and died a few weeks later. And I was like, I can't watch this anymore. I can't watch people trade their lives to be in the 1%. So that's why all of my clients, all my executives, everybody I work with, before they sign on with me, I let them know, yeah, I was hired to turn you into a leader, but we're going to talk about your entire fucking life. And if you're not up for that, we don't have to do this, because I really don't care how rich you are. I care, how deep your life is.
Wow. And you had a coach in your own journey. You mentioned like therapy. Was there kind of like a mentor you had in your life?
I had mentors in AA. I had mentors in men's groups, right? That taught me how to, like, I didn't know how to be a man. That taught me how to be a man, how to be a father. I had, and I did hire coaches. I hired a sales coach. Then I hired a coach when I became a coach, and all of them taught me, if I'm going to coach other people, you can't take your clients any further than you've gone. So you have to do your deep work. So that's when I just really went on a journey, and I've spent over $1 million on my training, on my my coaching skills and my inner work.
Wow. So yes, yeah, there's a lot in the transformation, it sounds like. And I guess, do you still have coaches now and mentors
Always.
now?
Although it's harder and harder to find people it is harder and harder to find people. I'm getting older, but I have a few people in my life who can tell me the truth, who can see through my own bullshit. Because it doesn't matter how enlightened you get, you're still a human, you still got bullshit. So I have people in my life. Actually, I meet with 3 other coaches who I've been meeting with now for a decade on Friday afternoon at 2:00 every single Friday for the last 10 years. And we support each other on our businesses. We support each other on our romantic lives, on our inner work, on all that stuff. So I always have people who are as intimate with me as I am.
I love that. And yeah, for someone who's maybe not sure about whether they need a coach or not, and they're like, oh, I'm going to do the work myself, what would kind of your guidance be around that?
If you have the money, get a good coach. If you have the money, like I tell all my clients who are having trouble exercising, I say I'm the ghost of Christmas future. I'm 63 years old. You're in your 30s. If I'm in better shape than you are, there's something wrong. And if they can't get themselves to the gym, but they can afford it, hire a trainer that you're accountable to. So if you can afford a coach, that's awesome. If you can't afford a coach, YouTube is ridiculous. There's some, Mark Manson, people like you, like we're all putting out this just fantastic content and step-by-step instructions on how to deconstruct yourself and reconstruct yourself. You can find someone you resonate with. You can find 5 people you resonate. Eckhart Tolle was just here. We got tickets to go see him, but I've seen every Eckhart Tolle video and read every book. Like, it's all free. Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul, he has a podcast, 2 podcasts a week, 300 podcasts you can listen to. And like these great sages that we've heard of from thousands of years ago, they're walking here today. You can listen to them. There's a bunch of young guys on YouTube who just teach you how to journal, teach you how to organize your day. Like, there's so much free stuff. But again, if you can afford it, having someone in your corner, having someone who knows you, having someone who looks you in the eye and calls bullshit is invaluable.
Love that. Yeah, there's these resources we forget about just there as well. Like you touched on the YouTube and the Michael Singer, the Eckhart Tolle's, all those kind of people, which was awesome. For you, Mark, what was beneficial about the men's group, being in the men's group in particular for the men out there?
My dad was awesome. I love my dad, and he was a great guy. But my dad had his own traumas, right? So he wasn't able to teach me the life skills I needed to learn. Now, I might not have been teachable. I don't know. He had an 8th grade education. He did the best he could. So I learned what it was like to be a man from reading Tom Clancy novels. I didn't know how to show up that way. And I also didn't know how to work with my inner demons, my shadows. I didn't know how to take that stuff and bring it out and look at it, which is invaluable, right? When you make friends with your shadows instead of pushing them down, when you say, oh my God, I'm scared of these types of people. This hurt me when I was young, and you can put it out there and look at it. All of a sudden, the light dissipates it. It helps you see the monsters for the illusion that they are. But you need a group of strong men doing their work also to help you. And then when you go home and you go to your marriage, you go to your children, you're a much stronger person because you have all those people in your corner.
So having a community to kind of like shed the shadows out. And it sounds like you went through, correct me if I'm wrong, sounded like in your sort of your late 40s, you went through bringing a lot of those shadows out.
They came out. Right? The ones that I suppressed, the ones that I didn't think to bring out, they exploded out of me because I didn't listen. I didn't do I didn't have the tools to do the work, and life did the work for me and said, you're going to look at this stuff, and slam me to the ground. And I'm so grateful. The worst period of my life, the worst thing that ever happened to me turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me because it turned me into this guy. But when I was going through it, I was like, why? Why am I dying here? Why am I suicidal? Why am I depressed? I don't understand what's happening to me. Now, in hindsight, I know, because now I I can hold any man's hand, any person's hand, and walk them through the fire because I've walked through the fire.
I remember hearing that sort of Eckhart Tolle's take on that as well, listening to some of his stuff, going through the dark night, as he called it, the dark night of the soul sometimes. Yeah.
That's the gateway to the next chapter in life.
Could be so painful at the moment, but then like a few months later, it's like, wow, that was what that was for. It's just
Exactly.
so powerful. Yeah, he's a great man to listen to. I love it. So yeah, Mark, I know obviously you've got the book, you've got lots of resources for people out there. You know, you do your speaking, you do your books. Where is the best place for the listener to find you if they want to reach out, get in touch, just generally find the resources they need for support?
Well, my family calls him Media Mark, so all over social media is Media Mark, my handles. But markjsilverman.com, mark_j.silverman.com is everything that I have. My first book, Only Tens, is which is my bout with ADHD and becoming an entrepreneur, is free on my website. I give that away, but you can get everything, the podcast, the Rising Leader podcast, everything there.
Amazing, on the website. And is there a final point you'd like to leave us with today?
You know, do the work. Like we push that away, the work, and we push it aside because we're busy. We're working on other stuff, but it pays so many dividends. Again, I'm the ghost of Christmas future. Doing that work creates such a freedom afterwards. I live such a life of joy and freedom and purpose and relationship because I did those work, that I want that for everybody, but you got to do the work to get there.
Yeah, you can always put it off, right? There's always things to distract us, but yeah, sounds like it's transformative for you when you went in and faced those things.
Night and day.
Loved it. Love it. That's amazing, Mark. So yeah, Mark, we'll be sure to link your website below, and I know there's loads of resources the listener can get there. And yeah, I'm an advocate for doing the work as well. It's always a work in progress for me, certainly. So thank you for sharing that as well and being here today.
I appreciate you, Johnny.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you too. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.